So, welcome to the Workshop Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew, and today I am joined by the fascinating Mr. Greg Walway of it's PlatteValley
Yep.
Woodworks,
Yep.
right? Or
Woodworks.
woodworking. I need to
Yep.
look at my notes. Woodworks on Instagram. It's funny, you talk to people on the Instagram and the social media, and you know people by their Instagram handle. And I know that I've interacted with you a few times, and I was like, oh crap, I forget his first name, and it took me a couple minutes to remember your first name before I sent you the email. There, when I sent you the email, it was G, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right, it's Greg. But
Yeah, I suck at names.
it's also beneficial when you put your name in when you sign in.
Yeah. Yeah. It does help.
Anyway, so thanks for coming on, and thanks for taking some time out of your day. So one of the things that I know I've interacted with you in the past a few times now was it was like a year or so ago that you had back surgery, didn't you? Isn't that when it was?
Yeah, back in June of 2022, mid-June, about the 15th of June, I had anterior lumbar fusion, which basically means they went in through my abdominal cavity, moved everything out of the way, and removed the disc basically between my lumbar number 5 and my it's L5S1 is what they said. So it's basically the last lumbar joint of the spine before you get to that pointy bone that goes down between your hips.
Yeah, your sacrum.
Yeah, there you go.
Fun, fun. So what precipitated that? Like, what happened? Did you have an injury or something that triggered it, or what?
Well, I really don't know. I think I'd like to blame anything, but it's possibly more genetic than anything. But it all stems back to probably 2008, 2007, maybe 2000. Yeah, probably 2007, 2008. I was driving cross country, kind of like you've been doing lately, and when we got to our destination, my lower back hurt so bad I was hunched over like a 99-year-old man who needed a cane or a walker, couldn't stand up straight. It took about 4 days of relaxation to get myself back up to normal. So I went, saw a chiropractor, and he says that I might have got a disc that's kind of flared and getting squished. So we did some adjusting and worked on that for a while. And ever since then, it's kind of lingered, but over the last 6 or 7 years, it's slowly gotten worse and worse. It's kind of gotten to the point where it's really starting to interfere with my day job, and that day job is a pretty physical day job. I'm on my feet most of the day, and I just finally decided to go see a professional, and they said, well, let's try this and that, and I tried physical therapy, which worked for a while. They have injections that they inject for painkiller that I got about 3 to 4 days worth of relief out of. And last ditch effort is to go in and do this spinal fusion. And we tried that last year, and so far it's been rough. It was good right afterwards, and then as we slowly worked into the more movement, it seemed to kind of agitate it, and it's now back up to where it was prior to surgery. And the best I've gotten from my doctor so far is it could take 18 months to get fully healed. So I've taken the road of, okay, I just need to grin and bear it, get through it, and come Christmas time, if there's still issues, I'll be visiting my doctor again and hoping that we can move on to something else.
You mostly make kind of smaller stuff, right? Like, you're not making a lot of big, huge projects.
I've made a few bigger projects for my house. Like I made a dining room table a few years back and a coffee bar, and then I made a desktop for the office where I'm in right now. But mostly it's yeah, it's smaller stuff, coasters and signs and little trinkets. I do a little work on the lathe and just kind of all around tinkering, I guess you could call it.
So is that a consequence of the back pain bugging you? Like, you'd love to do the big massive things, but you can't, or is that just you enjoy the smaller stuff anyway, so that doesn't matter?
I do enjoy the smaller stuff. I'd like to maybe build some other larger furniture. The dining room table was actually my first major woodworking project. I really I'd done a few tinkerings here and there. I'd made a few pens on the lathe at that point. I had made a small stool for my daughter who was like 4 at the time, and um, I kind of was like, I want to make something substantial, something bigger, something that I can say I made this. And the wife says, make us a table. And I went, okay. Kind of a jump from tiny little pens and stuff up to a dining room table, but we got some plans figured out, and I threw it together out of box store pine, and it's hasn't exploded yet.
I think that yeah, you reading the internet comments and you'd think that whatever you make, if you don't make it perfectly, it's going to blow up like friggin' Hiroshima or something and kill your whole family and all that, right?
Yeah, because that table is pocket hole screws and biscuit jointed, and it's got no room for wood movement, and it should be in a million pieces according to the internet, but it's still holding up there.
So do you now you said you work in a greenhouse, right? So the lifting and stuff like that bugs you as well? Like you feel or
Yeah, it does. It can. It's it's really kind of odd because if I sit at a desk for too long, I have back pain. If I go out and I do a lot of bending and twisting and lifting and stuff, I have back pain. If I stand in one spot for 5 minutes, I have back pain. If I just walk slowly, I have back pain. But if I keep at a good steady pace and I'm not doing like if I'm not out lifting 100-pound trees or anything like that, I can generally be okay. Um, there's always a little bit of pain there, but it's more manageable if I just kind of keep with it. And I've had days where I've done some repairing of our greenhouses, some work on some of the greenhouses, and one day I strapped on the tool belt and I just went to town and I felt great the whole day and I got a big project done. I felt great. And the next 4 days I was miserable because I'd used muscles that I hadn't used before on top of the back strains, and just kind of went, well, I guess I'm taking a pause on this project for a few days until I'm feeling better.
that's I think something that a lot of people don't realize is or don't think about is we as humans really are dynamic beings, right? Like we're built to move. We're built to do a variety of different things. And so one of the things that like you said that originally started bugging you is your trip across the states, right? Is that sitting down. I think a lot of people don't realize that sitting, even if you're supported in a really comfortable chair, a really comfortable seat, is actually a really compromised position when it comes to your low back. You're because your back is designed to be loaded straight on, right? It's not designed to be bent like that when it's receiving a load, whether that's lifting or whether it's like impact from bumps or whatever it is. And so people think, oh, I don't know, or will say, I don't understand why my back hurts. I have a really good chair and blah, blah, blah. Office workers are the same way. And it's like, well, you're not supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to be sitting down for a few minutes and then getting up and doing some moderate work and then doing something else and moving around. Standing still in one place for 5, 10, 15 minutes, that's not exactly natural either. But,
Yeah. And at the time of the trip across country where it flared up, I was doing a desk job. I was selling car parts at a Ford dealership, and I didn't have the best setup at the desk. I had a good chair, but I was leaning over to get to the computer a lot because it just really wasn't set up as a desk area. It was set up as a countertop, and that that we figured probably contributed a lot to it. I'm sure there was some degeneration in that disc already, and this just caused bulging because it was. I mean, you're hunched over, you're sitting and you're hunched at the same time, which is never the right position to be in.
yeah, that is the worst for you. It's kind of like the trifecta of evil. But so how do you find that working in the shop helps you? Does it help or does it make it worse and you just enjoy it so much that you do it anyway, or is that like a I feel good when I've done this so that compensates for it sort of thing?
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of everything. If I go and I stand at the lathe for too long, I'll regret it. But the good thing about being a turner is that you can go from start to finish on a small little project 15 minutes, and you are moving a little bit. You're not standing completely still, but you're not getting a lot of grand movements out of it. And for the most part, with the smaller projects, I don't get a lot of irritation out of it. So I just it's more of a mental escape for me to just go out into the shop and kind of get something done, and that euphoric feeling you get when you've accomplished whatever project you were looking at. Or I have a laser, and I just recently got a 3D printer. So when those projects come out, the euphoric feeling of accomplishing that just kind of kind of takes over, and you just kind of forget about everything else that's gone on.
I had a question I was just going to ask you to follow up, and then got distracted. ADHD kicked in.
Yeah, I know how that feels.
Oh, yeah, that's what it was. Uh, I went so my train of thought got derailed. What happened is as you were talking about working in the shop and that being a release for you, I thought about our pre-show. I guess I should throw in my plug. This was my train of thought. I thought I should ask him. We talked in the pre-show. So in the pre-show, I need to throw in the Patreon plug right there. So that's done. And then I forgot what I was going to ask you. But now I know what I was going to ask you. In the pre-show, you were talking a little bit about suffering from some anxiety and depression for a long time too. Is that affected by your time in the shop as well? Like, do you find you're able to handle life better when you've had some shop time, or?
Yeah, I think so. I do know that there are days when, you get home from work or whatever, and you're just completely burnt out and frustrated, and you don't want to do anything but go plop on the couch. But luckily for me, I have back pain, and I can't go plop on the couch, so I go out to the shop and I start tinkering away, and um, it does. It really kind of helps dissipate that rough day, or the anxiety of what tomorrow might bring, or maybe the depression of whatever happened that day that brought you down and got you in kind of a grumpy mood. And it's kind of amazing how workshop is a therapy for a lot of us because of that.
Yeah, well, that's why I named the podcast what it is, right? Workshop therapy. So many people do use it, and it is like you said on the lathe as well. Like, that's one of those tools where you can spend, you know, like you said, 15 minutes, and you can be completely finished a project depending on what you're doing. Like, if you're, I mean, even stuff like turning a top, you can turn a little top for your kid or whatever in 3 minutes. You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
you said you've been suffering from anxiety and depression for a long time. Is that something that some people, it affects your time in the shop? Like, you feel anxious about going out to the shop, or you feel depressed, and like you said, that you want to just throw yourself on the couch. But since you have back pain, you're forced to go out to the shop, or to be up and doing something rather than just flop on the couch. How does that interplay of pain and anxiety, depression, all that type of stuff, how does that affect the rest of your life?
Well, it can get it can get kind of depressing sometimes when you know that you just can't take a day to yourself where you just sit down in the recliner and flip on the TV and on a Sunday and watch football all day, or Saturday and watch college sports all day, or whatever. It gets to you every once in a while. Just the idea that I'd love to just be able to sit around and lounge and relax, but if I do that for too long, then I'm paying for it later, so I need to get up. And just the mental aspect of it, of that too, of, oh, I sat around all day today and I didn't get anything done, and then beating yourself up over that because you took a day yourself, even if it was maybe you went out in the shop but you skipped laundry and mowing the lawn or something. Wouldn't even have to be sitting there on the couch. It could be just, oh, I'm going to go out and turn this bowl or turn this pen, and then you're like, oh, well, now I'm going to do this, and now I'm going to do that, because, like you say, the ADHD kicks in, and you're off on 10 different tangents, and you get done with the day, and you're like, well, gosh, I didn't get anything done. This was my day off. I was supposed to mow. I was supposed to do the dishes. I was supposed to do the laundry. I was supposed to go and get, groceries or something like that. It can really weigh down on you when you can't just have a day to relax completely, but you work
Yeah.
through it.
So do you have any other side hobbies or things that you do to keep yourself busy, or deal with things besides the shop time? Or, I mean, getting into 3D design now?
Well, that's kind of scary for me anyway. I've never really considered myself that much of a designer. Um, I have to consider myself a creator because I go out in the shop and I create one thing or another. But uh, the design thing of it's always kind of one of those things that I've just never felt like I had the eye for it. But I'm gonna try to learn how to do some 3D design right now. I'm just kind of trying to tweak the machine, trying to figure it out because as much as I'd love to think that 3D printing is just put in the program to the computer and tell it to print it, I'm finding there's a lot of stuff that goes along with it. There's getting that printer set up so that it actually prints the print nice and clean and clear, or even prints it at all for that matter. I've had several prints fail on me, and I'm trying to work through figuring out how to fix those problems.
Yeah, I bought a 3D printer for my son this Christmas, say, and we've been having fun with that. And for the life of me, I cannot get it to print a perfect circle. It's always elongated in the X direction.
Huh.
And like I've calibrated it a dozen times. I've tensioned the belts. I've slacked the belts off. I've done all the troubleshooting stuff that I can find, and it always prints in just that little bit off. It's like a half a millimeter over 20 millimeters. So it's not huge, but it's still enough to mess things up, and I just can't figure it out. But,
Yeah, I'm having issues main issues right now is getting the printer head to sit level with my print bed. The printer I got has self-leveling on it, but I've ran that self-leveling multiple times and I still can't get that print to come out where it looks like it's actually printing on a level bed. So we're gonna have to go back to square one, maybe try running the manual um, leveling on that bed to see if that clears anything up or not. But it's definitely interesting. It can be very frustrating from time to time. I know my daughter is loving the 3D printer because I'm making all these silly little toys for her, and she gets frustrated pretty easily. 10-year-old with the wanting to be perfect at everything, she tends to get frustrated when something doesn't go her way. And when it's a 3D print, I just look at her and I go, "Hey, we're learning this 3D printer. If you mess it up, we throw it away and we print another one. It's really not that big a deal. I didn't buy this filament to make money on it. I bought this filament to try to figure this printer out. Once we figure it out, then we can start making some cool stuff."
yeah, when I the first print that my son and I did, the thing that blew me away most about it was the amount of filament it used. Like I was anticipating using a whole lot more than it did. Like it blew me away how efficient that actually is too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm blown away by it as well. And just the scope of how light some of the prints come out. I was trying to print a hand, and it's a life-sized hand. It's supposed to be cousin or not cousin, but thing from the Addams family, and it printed and failed about here on the from the wrist up. And you look at that, and it looks like it should weigh 6 pounds, and it's barely an ounce. It's nothing. There's nothing to it, but um, it was surprising in how much little filament it actually goes through when you're printing this, even a big print.
So how long you been doing the whole woodworking thing? Like is that one of those lifelong pursuits as well? You said you grew up on a farm. Like I know for me, you grow up on a farm, and you either do it yourself or you don't have the thing, whatever it is, right? Is that kind of how it was for you?
Right. Yeah, it was. Grew up on the farm, and like I said, if you didn't have it and you couldn't make it, you didn't have it. But I grew up. I like to take things apart and put things back together. Tinkering with my hands was always something I like to do. I grew up with a grandfather who did woodworking, and the lathe I'm using and the bandsaw I use were his. The drill press I used were his. I did have his old 50s Craftsman table saw, but that scared me enough to buy a buy a nicer cabinet saw. So, but yeah, I do that. My father does woodworking now as well, and kind of picked it up from his dad. I've picked it up from him. My brother does a little bit as well, and just kind of one of those family traditions that we get together and we all kind of talk about what we've been working on or what we're making. We'll send text messages with pictures of our latest projects and stuff, and it's always kind of fun to see what the family's working on.
I've always been curious about that aspect of the thing of the creative. What would you say? The creative impulse in people. How much of it is a family genetic thing, you know. As we're on this trip here, we've been to a few places that I have some family history, and uh, my is he fifth great grandfather, I think fifth or sixth, something like that. He was Captain Jeremiah Hatch of the. He fought in the Revolutionary War here, right? And so then as we've been kind of tracking along some of my family history as my family moves from shortly after the Mayflower across New England and then out to we're heading to Illinois here next. In Nauvoo, Illinois, Captain Jeremiah Hatch built the only known house in Illinois that's built by a veteran of the Revolutionary War, and so it's still there. So we're gonna go see that, and then go out farther west and into southern Utah. There's a little town called Hatch, Utah, and my brother was down there a couple years ago, and he went to this place, and there's a statue to the founder of the town, and I forget his first name now, but my brother had to laugh because he sent me a picture of the plaque underneath this statue, and it said, "So and so Hatch was a quiet man with a few cows and a sawmill," which made me laugh because when I bought my sawmill, my grandpa told me that I became the sixth generation to own a sawmill in our family that he knew of. And then, of course, I had a few cows, and my dad had a sawmill and a few cows, and so I'm curious about that whole thing. You know, like, is there something genetic to people that they come that way, or is it like all a learned behavior, and just that intergenerational trauma of having to make things is just coming down through the life, you know?
I like how you call it drama. I think there's probably some genetics, but I think a lot of it is all just learned because I have extremely fond memories of going in my grandfather's basement to play around a pool because his other hobby outside of woodworking when he retired was playing billiards, was playing pool. And he had a pool table in his basement, and he'd go to the local senior center and they'd play and they'd have tournaments with the local senior centers and the towns around where we grew up at. And I just remember going down, and we'd have to ask first, can we go down and play pool? Because every Sunday after church, we'd go to Grandma and Grandpa's house for lunch, and then we'd spend the afternoon hanging out with them. Mom and Dad would be upstairs talking with Grandma and Grandpa, and my brother and I would go down to the basement, and as long as the pool table didn't have a bunch of woodworking projects on it, we could play pool for the afternoon. And we'd always have to ask Grandpa, can we go down and play pool? And he'd be like, oh, I got to come down and clean it off first. So he'd go down, and then we'd spend 20, 30 minutes talking about his current project, what he was working on, and the smell. He loved to work with walnut, and I've developed that addiction as well. And the smell just really takes me back to that time as a kid growing up and going down to the basement that just always smelled of walnut sawdust.
You see, for me, my mom's parents, both of them, died before I was even born. Or I guess that's not true. My mom's dad died when I was 8 months old, so I have zero memory of him. My dad's dad, he died. I mean, he was the only grandparent that I knew because his wife, my grandma, she died 5 or 6 years before I was born. But my grandpa, I mean, he wasn't a bad person or anything like that, but he wasn't really around. Like, I didn't really have any memories of him. Really, I mean, he was always the old man that we went and visited every once in a while, and that was it, right? Like, I remember most of my memories of my grandpa are sitting in his living room while we talked about stuff because he was already in his late 80s, you know. Like, by the time I can remember, he was an old man. But then as I developed this my woodworking passion, I suppose, my mom and my aunt, they, oh, you know, you're just like dad, you know, dad, your grandpa, he used to love woodworking, blah blah blah. And then they start bringing out all of these little intricate wood puzzles and stuff that he made, right? And like, I have no have no experience of him doing this, but so there's obviously some component of memory for you and some sort of weird genetic flaw in myself. But
Yeah, that's yeah, I was lucky. My parents moved to the farm when I was like 8 or 9 months old. So I grew up with my dad's parents, Grandma and Grandpa Walway. For my entire childhood was spent knowing them and growing up with them. And I was the youngest grandchild. My brother and I were the last two grandchildren born, and we both got to grow up with them and all our other cousins, I guess. Probably stemmed some jealousy because they'd only get a visit once or twice a year, and we'd go there pretty much every Sunday and get to hang out with them. My grandpa, well, like I said, was a woodworker. My grandma was a crocheter and a quilter. And in fact, when I was probably 7 to 10 years old, my grandma taught both me and my brother, who's older than me, how to crochet. And because she didn't have any probably because she didn't have any granddaughters in her life at the time. And she asked, and my brother and I were like, "Yeah, absolutely. Let's figure this out. We'd love to do it." And that's something I still can do today. I don't do it regularly. My wife has picked it up. I sort of passed that on to her and showed her how to do that. My daughter, who's 10, is learning how to do that, and she asked my mom if she would teach her. So my mom got that chance to kind of pass that knowledge on to my daughter, which of course they love to do. So it's kind of interesting that making or crafting or whatever you want to call it kind of just runs through the DNA. I don't know how else to express it because my daughter's always been creative. She's always been artistic. My wife is very autistic and she's very creative. She's actually a designer by um, through her college degree. She got a degree in kitchen and bath design. So that that creativeness does flow because I saw it in my daughter immediately when the minute she could grab a crayon, she wanted to color on paper and make something. So yeah, I think you're right. There is a bit of a possibly a bit of a curse with that creative gene running around.
I know sometimes it's definitely a bit of a curse. Like we're on this trip, right? Like I should look at my truck here. Hold on. Let's hopefully it doesn't make a huge. Oh no, that'll bug the neighbors. Never mind. I was gonna turn on. Oh, there's my mileage. 109,000 miles right now, and what was it when we left? Basically about 13,000 miles, I think, is what we've put on the truck this summer. And so we've driven a fair amount. And in the trailer, we have all of our little kid things there, right? And our youngest, she's 2, and she just absolutely loves to cut up paper with scissors. Like that's just she'll sit there and cut up paper for an hour or two without a batting an eye,
Yeah.
and in a small space like a 21-foot travel trailer, that makes a tremendous mess. And then we have my son. He's 13, and he's like the whittle champion of the world. He'll just sit there and make a mess of any sort of stick and knife you give him. And then my middle child, she's 6, and she's constantly, we have because of my hand injury, I'm off work. That's why we're doing this trip, right? And I have this theraputty for kind of working my hand and strengthening my hand, rehabbing myself, and so I'm using that all the time. But it also makes perfect just Play-Doh basically, and so that's constantly out on the table. And then the colorings it's always out on the table and blah blah blah. But
Yeah, my table's pretty messy right now. We're in the process of making small wooden earrings, and the wife has been coming up with the designs, and asking her coworkers if they were interested in them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'd like one of these. I'd like one of those." And so we're out there. I'm out there cutting little eighth-inch pieces of basswood or balsa wood with the laser, and she's in the kitchen putting the rings on it and the ear hooks for the earrings, and it's like, okay, we gotta have supper. Let's shove all this stuff off to the side so we can eat, and then pull it all back out afterwards so we can keep working on it. So yeah, I get it. And of course, tonight, I go in there and she's working on earrings, and my daughter's coloring and drawing a fish on a piece of paper with some fancy markers, and it's like, oh, well, you guys have fun.
well, that's right. when I said the intergenerational trauma, I was intentional with that wording because I'm curious to how much we as people are affected by that. It's the whole nature versus nurture thing, right? Like, is it 100% learned behavior? Is it 100% genetic? Somewhere it's obviously in between. But
Yeah.
I mean, for you, definitely, there's obviously those associated memories of, oh, this was a fun, happy time with my family. I think a lot of it for me is that mental trauma of growing up on a farm, growing up poor sort of thing where you need to figure it out for yourself, otherwise it's just not going to happen. Um, yeah. Anyway, but I think it's a really important thing though for kids to learn though too, right? Is that ability to do things by hand and to understand that they can be productive with the things that they do. You don't have to sit and watch video games. You don't have to sit and watch TV and still do something valuable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. My daughter's a multitasker. She likes to watch videos and draw on her iPad at the same time. She'll have the TV running or a YouTube video running on her phone, and she'll have her iPad in her lap with her pen, and she'll be on Procreate just drawing away on something, just making up a picture or making up an image of some sort, and then she'll put a story behind it, or she'll purposely start a story and then illustrate for it. So it's it's interesting where that all comes from because I didn't really start the heavy into the making until basically 2020 is when I jumped on Instagram and really started to join the community. But it was late in 2020 before I made that dining room table, and she's been creative her whole life. I mean, I remember as a baby, she was wanting to know what was on top of the dining room table, and she walked over, grabbed a box of diapers, set the box of diapers next to the table, stood on the box of diapers so she could see on top of the table. That problem solving, creating, just instantly happened without any of us really nudging that along. That just pops right out.
Yeah, I was ran across a quote by who was it? It was either Picasso or Van Gogh. I think it was Van Gogh. The artist, right? Vincent Van Gogh. He said something to the effect that children are born creative. Our challenge is to maintain that creativity as we become adults. I think creativity is kind of crushed out of us by the system that we go through. Almost almost it's almost mandated that it's destroyed as you grow older, because we view that creative process like coloring, oh, that's kids stuff, or imagination, that's a children's play thing. And then you go to school, public school, and you're told to sit down and fill out this worksheet. Sit down in your desk and do what you're told, and don't make noise. Don't be creative.
It's tough. I don't I don't envy the teachers that have to deal with my daughter because last year she got in trouble because she started to sing along in the middle of math class. But that's that creative side of her that just really tends to show its ugly head every once in a while in the wrong spot. But you just make sure that we express that, hey, this is not the right time to do it. There's a time and a place for the sing along. Try maybe doing that in music class and not in math class, and um, express your creativity in art and when you're at home. And that's really what she's really turned that corner and really gotten more focused on the school aspect of it. But luckily for us here, we have a really good school system. I know once she gets into high school, there's going to be a ton of opportunity for her to exercise that creative side of her brain. So I really hope that once that we can nurture this creativity throughout her entire childhood and into her teenage years, and get her into adulthood still being creative and having this imagination that she has, because I kind of miss having that imagination. She's asked me to make up stories, and I sit there and I'm like, man, I could have made up a story when I was your age that would have lasted 5 hours, but now I can't think of anything to tell you right now for a bedtime story.
Yeah. Now the bedtime story is, there was a grumpy old man who had to go to work all day long, and when he got home, he was tired and wanted to go to bed. The end.
Right, and he lived in a shack that was cold all winter and hot all summer.
And he was bitter.
Always bitter.
Yeah. The other thing that I ran across here just yesterday actually was do you know who Neil deGrasse Tyson is?
I don't off the top of my head. The name sounds familiar, but I don't know.
He's a physicist. He's quite famous. He's a black dude,
See,
very smart astrophysicist, I believe is what he is.
okay, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you see him all over the place on in the media.
Yeah.
But he was doing this interview with somebody, and I forget who it was, but he was talking about how we as parents also need to nurture our kids' creativity. And one of the things that he said is as parents, we often stop our children from doing things. Like the toddler reaches up to the table to grab a cup, and they're going to knock it over. And so you say, "Stop, don't do that. You're going to knock it over, blah, blah, blah. It's going to make a mess." And so he said, that's stopping the child from doing an experiment. Does it really matter that the water gets spilled? They will learn that gravity is a thing, that water is wet, these things that they will learn. But so our job as parents is to not be concerned as much about, oh, the house is a mess, as much as it is, oh, they were creative and they learned something.
Right.
It was a really good point.
I had I heard something. I don't remember where I picked it up from, but somebody was talking about it. They were talking about children in pain and how when a child gets hurt and they are screaming bloody murder and they sound like they're going to die, but to them that is probably the worst pain they have ever experienced in their life, and to not recognize that as a learned adult, that oh, they just got a sliver, or they jammed a finger, or they fell down and skinned a knee. That's no big deal. Just we say get up and brush it off, rub some dirt on it, whatever. But to them, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to them, and to not try to recognize that is easier to do than to actually recognize the fact that they are experiencing something brand new to them, when it's just, oh, that's just a skinned knee to us.
Yeah, it's very true. I actually talked about that same thing with my brother one time. We were talking about how little babies, they wake up and they've peed their diaper and they cry, and they're hungry and they cry, and so on and so forth. And really, it's true. It's this wet diaper, or this hunger pain in my stomach. This is literally the worst experience of my entire life. And then as they grow and get older, they recognize that, oh yeah, my tummy is hungry, but it's not the worst thing. I'm going to get fed. I'll be okay. And so then they cry about the bigger things, like they lost their toy or they stubbed their toe or whatever it is. And so as you grow and you learn, the things that you cry about are are bigger and bigger things. So when you see an adult crying, they're really hurting.
Yeah, yeah.
But
It's really interesting to just that aspect, to think about what the child is going through, and to think about, to actually remember that, yeah, they need to experiment, they need to experience the world. To If we sugarcoat it and just tell them what is going to happen before they do it, they'll never really know until they actually accomplish that, whether it is spilling the cup of water or it is climbing the stairs or their first step. If we're constantly picking them up and carrying them around, it's going to take them longer to experience that first step, as opposed to, putting them on the ground and letting them roll around and learn to crawl, and then learn to eventually pull themselves up on their feet. And that's when the learning really begins.
absolutely. And I mean, within reason, right? Like, don't let your kid go play with the bandsaw when they're 2 years old. But
Yeah, I don't have to worry about that. It's too loud for my daughter. She gets into loud tools and she's done. But she'll sand and she'll glue, and she's really interested in epoxy right now. And she's interested in what I'm doing on the laser, but not so much interested in learning what to do to make the laser do its thing. But
yeah, my son likes to run the laser, but I think it's partly because he can go sit out in the shop and play computer games running the laser, right? Because you put your thing on the laser and then it sits there and runs for 10 minutes, and then he can sit there and play on the computer. But I don't know.
yeah,
Anyway, we're closing in on the hour here.
okay.
So I would like to kind of let's wrap everything back up. We've talked about back pain, anxiety, depression, parenting, creativity, all of these types of things. Let's kind of wrap it all up. When it comes to dealing with, specifically in your case, you have some experience dealing with back pain. What's one piece of, you know, workshop therapy advice that you could give people about dealing with pain?
That's a deep question. Right now for me, it's it keep I keep going because I'm dealing with the pain because there's that light at the end of the tunnel that come December, I'm going to be 18 months post-op and hopefully everything will kind of straighten itself out and clean itself out. I think the biggest thing is know your limits. I'm still trying to find mine. There's days where I might not do enough, and then there's days where I do way too much. If you're dealing with a lot of pain, uh, you had a guy on here a few episodes back that was talking about the same thing. He's like, he's got to develop your limits, know when to say when, and know that okay, I can't go do this because or I need help doing this because I'm not going to be able to lift this up muscle wise. I can, but it's going to cause pain for the rest of the day or the next 3 or 4 days, um, and find that release or find that hobby or action that does kind of help give you relief mentally from the pain. The pain might not be there, but you put yourself in front of a lathe for 15, 20 minutes and it kind of goes away because you're concentrating on the spinning chunk of wood that could fly and hit your face or the sharp chisel you're attaching to this spinning chunk of wood. And you really kind of have to, take your brain out of that pain moment and put it right into what your hands are doing and find that special hobby, whatever it might be, whether it could just be going out and going fishing or sitting in a chair on the side of the beach or something. But whatever helps, anything that helps kind of get your mind away from it so that it's not just constantly on your brain because that really wears you down really fast when you're dealing with chronic pain issues because the more you have to think about it, the more it just builds and builds and builds in the back of your head. And there's I don't know, there's not a lot you can do about it in some cases. Other cases you can. If you've exhausted your medical options, then you start looking for the hobbies or the things you can do that get you out of that pain space and clears your mind a little bit and gives you some relief.
Yeah, and I think another kind of in conclusion here, another thing too that's important to remember for you, for me, for everybody is if you need help, ask for it. You know, reach out to somebody and they can give you a hand and whether that's for learning a new skill in your hobby or if you have a project that you don't feel comfortable doing flipping the heavy table over and you have back pain or in my in my case hand pain, if you need a little bit of a hand to do something, that's okay too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like find the thing. It goes to the mindfulness. There's a lot of benefit when you're dealing with chronic issues, whether it's a physical pain or a mental issue or even just a stress relief thing. Taking something that you can be focused on to shut out the voices, to shut out the background noise, whether it's the voice of pain or the voice of depression or anxiety, whatever it is, just something you can focus on, clear your mind, and just be in that moment. That mindfulness thing, I think, is a really important takeaway for everybody.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I found once I found podcasts, especially the maker. I don't listen to many podcasts other than maker related podcasts. So once I found those, that really helps me out mentally because if I have to sit and do my job all day by myself, I'm going to be in my head. If I can pop in a podcast into an ear and listen to somebody with $1 million shop or a $20 shop and talk about what they've been working on or how they're going to accomplish this next feat, that really does help mentally, helps you get through the regular workday, especially if you're dealing with chronic pain or depression or anxiety, because it just gives you something else to put your mind on and gets you out of your, like you said, gets rid of those voices in the back of your head telling you that, oh, you're not good enough or you're not gonna make it or you've got so much to do, and it's really helped. So find that too if it's just listening to music or even a podcast.
Well, thanks for sharing your time with me tonight, Greg. I appreciate the conversation that we've had so far. Where can everybody find you on the internets?
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for having me. I do appreciate it. This is the first time I've ever been on a podcast, so it'll be interesting to hear myself. Never been a fan of my voice, but if anybody wants to check me out, I'm at PlatteValley Woodworks on Instagram. That's all one word, no underscores, no dashes. I'm at PlatteValleyWoodworks.com for a website. I also have Facebook, but Facebook is the same thing as Instagram. There is a YouTube out there, same thing. There's a few videos. I'm not big on videoing and editing, but feel free to check it out and tell me how bad they are, because they are pretty bad. Other than that, I'm pretty much on Instagram regularly, so most of my content goes straight to the PlatteValley Woodworks account on Instagram.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for listening, everybody. And remember, if you want to catch the pre-show where we talked a little bit, and of course we're going to have a post-show here, you can head over to Patreon and sign up there. Or you can just, ignore this and make us sad, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you later. Hey, I just want to say thank you to all the patrons of the Workshop Therapy podcast. You guys make this show possible. If you're finding the show helpful and want to support it, there are a few tiers, including a simple $1 a month option to just say thanks. For $5 a month, you get access to the patrons-only video and podcast that has the pre-show and post-show, in addition to the regular podcast all in one feed. We all know the good stuff happens after the official mics are off, right? The $25 level gets you access to a monthly group coaching session where we can discuss all the things related to mental and physical health, any questions that you have and you feel comfortable with sharing. If you can't support financially, I totally understand, but I'd love it if you left a 5-star review or told a friend about the podcast. I just want to say thank you to the founding members of the Workshop Therapy Patreon family: Eric of Overall Makerworks, Keith Drennan of Blackthorn Concepts, Brad of Brad's Customs, Matthew Serio from Arciano Serio, and the Grant Alexander. If you want to join on Patreon to support the show or just say thank you, I'd appreciate it.